Most people think they know MASH. 11 seasons, 251 episodes, one of the highest-rated finales in American television history. They watched it as kids, rewatched it as adults, and arrived somewhere comfortable with the idea that they had the show figured out. They don't. Nobody does. Because MASH was built on a foundation of secrets. Decisions made in writers' rooms and on sound stages and in contract negotiations that the audience never heard about, that changed everything about what ended up on screen, and that most fans have spent decades watching right past without realizing what they were missing. The show you think you know is a surface. Underneath it is a completely different story about how it got made, who fought over it, who walked away from it, and what the people creating it were actually trying to say that they could not say directly. That story is more complicated and more interesting than the comfortable version most people carry around. And some of what is in it will permanently alter how you see certain scenes. What makes these secrets different from standard behind-the-scenes trivia is that most of them are not really about the production. They are about the gap between what the show appeared to be and what it actually was. Between what the people in it appeared to be doing and what they were actually doing. Between what the audience thought they were watching and what was being said to them through it. That gap is where MASH lived, and it is where this video is going. 15 of those secrets are coming. Some will change how you watch scenes you have already seen 100 times. Some will change how you think about people you thought you understood. And at least one will make you go back and rewatch something with completely different eyes. Number 1. Gary Berghoff was the only actor to appear in both the original MASH film and the television series. Most people know this. What almost nobody knows is exactly why the producers kept him when they were building the show fresh. When CBS was developing the television adaptation, they seriously considered recasting every role from scratch. Screen tests were conducted. Multiple actors auditioned for multiple parts. Berghoff was kept not because of sentiment or name recognition, but because nobody else who tested could replicate what he did with Radar. The specific combination of physical smallness, genuine emotional transparency, and a particular quality of attentive watchfulness that made you believe this person actually sensed things before they happened was something Berghoff had, and no other actor they tested could manufacture or approximate. He was not retained because he was famous or because he was the obvious choice. He was retained because the role did not work the same way without him. There is a version of MASH where Radar O'Reilly is played by someone else, and the show still exists, but something essential is absent, and nobody can quite name what it is. That version was briefly possible during the casting process. Berghoff made it unnecessary. He also carried the weight of knowing it, which may be part of what makes his performance across all 8 seasons feel like something more than acting. Number 2. The laugh track was one of the most bitterly contested creative decisions in the show's entire history, and the people who made MASH lost the argument with CBS. Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds, who developed the series, fought against including a laugh track from the beginning. They believed a laugh track was fundamentally incompatible with a show set in a combat zone, that telling the audience when to find something funny was at odds with the experience they were trying to build. CBS disagreed and insisted, citing network research suggesting that viewers in that era were uncomfortable with comedies that did not provide audio cues. The compromise eventually reached allowed the laugh track to be removed during operating room sequences, on the grounds that laughter during surgery would be tonally indefensible. This produced an unintended and genuinely significant effect. Viewers unconsciously registered the OR as a different emotional space from the rest of the camp, even when they could not explain why. The tonal shift was never explained within the show. It was simply present and felt, and it is one of the primary reasons those scenes carry a weight that the surrounding material does not always match. Gelbart and Reynolds lost the argument with CBS. 11 seasons later, watching those OR scenes in silence while the rest of the show uses a laugh track, you understand exactly what they were fighting for. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us which of these you already knew and which ones genuinely caught you off guard. Because some of what is coming in this list has stopped me mid-thought even after years of watching the show. Number 3. McLean Stevenson's departure from MASH after Season 3 was his own choice, made against the advice of almost everyone around him. He felt the show was centering too heavily on Hawkeye and that remaining in the ensemble was limiting what his individual career could become. He wanted to headline his own project. He wanted his name above the title. What happened after he left is one of the more sobering cautionary tales in television history. Pilot after pilot came and went. Most were cancelled before a full season aired. The solo work never generated the audience the MASH ensemble had built around him. He died in 1996 at 68, and the role that defines him permanently in the public imagination is the one he walked away from at the height of the show's success. Here is the detail that makes the story stranger. When Stevenson left, the producers did not give Henry Blake a proper farewell. They killed him. In the final 60 seconds of the season 3 finale, with no warning and no ceremony and no room for anyone to say what they needed to say. They kept the ending secret from the entire cast, from CBS executives, from essentially everyone outside the core writing team, until the cameras were rolling on the scene where the news is read aloud. The shock you see on the other actors' faces is not acting. They had just been told. Some of them have spoken about that moment in interviews decades later, and it still sounds close. Gary Berghoff in particular has described it as one of the most disorienting experiences of his professional life, and he was the one who had to stand in that room and deliver the news. Number 4. Alan Alda directed 31 episodes of MASH and wrote 19, a level of creative involvement that was genuinely unusual for a lead actor in American television of that era, and that shaped the series in ways that are difficult to fully separate from his performance. His influence extended well beyond what appeared in the credits. The episode in the final season where Hawkeye suffers a complete psychological breakdown, an hour widely considered one of the finest pieces of American television produced in that decade, was co-written by Alda. He has said publicly that he drew on real emotional material to write it. Real exhaustion accumulated over years of playing someone who carries everything and processes almost none of it. Real grief that had built up without adequate outlet. The episode required something that could not be researched or approximated into existence. Alda has also described the experience of shooting certain scenes in that episode as among the most personally difficult work he has done in a career spanning decades. Watch it knowing that, and something in what you are seeing changes. There is no performance in the conventional sense. There is a man sitting inside something real and the camera staying with it, and the audience was allowed access to something that television, in its normal mode of operation, almost never makes available. Number 5. The show filmed entirely on location in Malibu Creek State Park in California, which stood in for the Korean landscape for the entire 11-year run. The terrain was chosen because it resembled Korean hillsides convincingly enough for 1970s television. Rather than striking the physical set of the 4077th between seasons and rebuilding it at the start of each new production period, the studio left the structures standing on location year-round. The camp became a permanent installation in the California hills for more than 3 decades after the show ended. In November 2018, a wildfire moved through the area and destroyed most of what remained of the set. The ruins are still visible in the park if you know where to look. Hikers come across them on ordinary afternoons and find themselves standing inside the burned outlines of buildings they watched on television as children. There is no formal marker identifying what the site was. No plaque, no sign, no acknowledgement that anything significant ever stood there. Just the shapes of things that used to be the 4077th in the California hills, slowly receding into the landscape that was always there underneath them. If you wanted to visit, you could. Some people do, and they find it difficult to describe what it is like when they get there. If you want more deep dives into MASH like this one, subscribing takes about 2 seconds. We cover this show regularly, and some of the upcoming videos go into territory even longtime fans have never closely examined. Number 6. Klinger's cross-dressing began as a 1-episode background gag in the pilot that got a strong enough response that the writers made it a recurring character trait. But what most accounts of this story leave out is how carefully and consistently Jamie Farr managed what the character actually meant across all 11 seasons. Farr was meticulous about playing Klinger as a man willing to be publicly humiliated if it meant getting home, not as a man with any authentic desire to present as a woman. That distinction mattered to Farr enormously, and he maintained it in interviews for decades. The character was about desperation, not gender identity. It was about a person with no institutional power using the only tool available to him against an institution that otherwise controlled everything about his existence. When you watch Klinger with that frame in place, the costumes stop reading as simple comedy. They read as defiance. The most visible act of protest a man with no formal recourse could manage against a system he cannot leave and cannot beat and will not stop resisting. Farr understood this interpretation from the beginning and played it even when the scripts did not consistently support it. The show gave him the gag. He gave it something that lasted longer than the gag did, and the depth he brought to Klinger is one of the more underappreciated creative achievements across the entire run. It also helped that Farr was genuinely funny, which meant the protest read as comedy, and the comedy concealed the protest, which is a more sophisticated balancing act than the show ever fully acknowledged. Number 7. Harry Morgan appeared in MASH twice, playing two entirely different characters, and the show quietly pretended the first appearance had never happened. In a Season 3 episode, Morgan played a general who was clearly experiencing a significant psychological breakdown. His performance was precise and genuinely unsettling, and earned him an Emmy nomination for the guest appearance. Then, one season later, he was cast as Colonel Sherman Potter, a completely different man with no acknowledged connection to the general he had previously played. The writers never addressed the continuity. The audience accepted the new character entirely and without apparent confusion. Morgan went on to win an Emmy for Potter, making him one of the only actors in television history to receive Emmy recognition for two separate characters in the same series. The willingness of the show to move forward and trust the audience to follow is either a significant oversight or an extraordinary act of confidence. Watching Morgan's first appearance after years of knowing Potter is one of the stranger experiences the MASH-back catalogue offers. The same face, a completely different person. The show asking you to forget what you saw and succeeding completely, which tells you everything you need to know about what Morgan was doing with both performances. Number 8. The series finale is the most watched episode of any scripted television series in American history, when measured as a proportion of the available audience at time of broadcast. 106 million people watched it in February 1983. The Super Bowl played that same year drew approximately 40 million fewer viewers. The production itself was structurally unusual. Rather than the compressed episodic schedule the series normally operated on, the finale was filmed across several months because the emotional demands of the material made a faster pace unsustainable for the cast and crew. The people making the show had been together for 11 years. Some of them had spent more of their adult lives on that set than in any other single place. Alda has described the filming as among the most difficult professional experiences of his career, and he is careful to specify that the difficulty was not technical or physical. It was the experience of genuinely and irreversibly ending something that had been real. A production that could not pretend it was simply work, because for 11 years it had been considerably more than that for almost everyone involved. Some productions are jobs. This one was a life. And the finale required living through the end of it in front of cameras, while the scene demanded that the grief be real, and it was. Number 9. Loretta Swit wanted to leave MASH on multiple occasions during its run, and the official narrative of the show tends to omit this entirely in favor of a more comfortable version. Swit received significant offers for film roles throughout the series and requested releases from her contract more than once. CBS declined each time. She stayed. The character of Margaret Houlihan, who began the series as a broadly drawn antagonist, used primarily as a comic foil for Hawkeye and Trapper, became over those years one of the most emotionally precise and carefully developed characters in the entire ensemble. Margaret's evolution from a two-dimensional obstacle into a fully realized human being did not happen automatically or by design. It happened because Swit found more in the character than the writing always asked for and put it on screen regardless. And eventually the writers followed what she was doing, rather than the other way around. Whether that evolution happens if Swit is replaced mid-run, whether another actress finds what she found, or whether the writers bother looking for it, is a question the show's history raises without answering. The constraint produced something extraordinary. It was still a constraint imposed on someone who had the right to make a different choice about her own career. Both of those things are true simultaneously. Number 10. The show maintained a specific policy about patients in the operating room that was unusual for American television of its era, and that is almost never acknowledged in retrospectives. From early in the production, the writers and producers agreed that patients would not be treated as anonymous. They would have names, sometimes dialogue, sometimes a brief detail of personality or background that established them as people with lives rather than medical problems with drama attached. The intention was to prevent the audience from experiencing the surgery sequences as action without consequence, and to keep the human cost of the war specific and visible throughout the run. This sounds like a minor craft decision. Across 251 episodes, it accumulates into a sustained moral argument about what a war actually does, and to whom. The patients were not obstacles between scenes. They were the reason the scenes existed. The policy was not always honored perfectly across 11 seasons. But it was there as a consistent intention, and the difference it made to the show's moral weight over time is one of the primary reasons MASH has remained in the culture while most of what surrounded it has not. Shows about war that treat casualties as set dressing do not tend to outlast their era. Shows that treat casualties as people tend to outlast almost everything. Number 11. Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John McIntyre for the first 3 seasons, left under circumstances considerably messier than the public record typically reflects. Rogers felt the show had drifted away from the co-lead dynamic he had been promised when he signed, and had shifted increasingly toward a single protagonist structure centered on Hawkeye. When he decided to leave, his lawyers examined his original contract and discovered that a key binding clause had not been properly executed. He was technically not legally obligated to remain with the production. He left without facing the breach of contract lawsuit the studio initially threatened. The character of Trapper John was then written out while Rogers was alive, available, and presumably capable of filming a farewell scene if the production had chosen to offer one. He did not get one. Hawkeye woke up one morning and Trapper was simply gone without a word. The show presented this as an abrupt narrative event. It was also an accurate reflection of how the actual professional relationship had ended. The awkwardness you feel watching that departure is not incidental to the storytelling. It is the truth of what had happened leaking through the fiction in ways the show may not have fully intended, but that served the story anyway. Number 12. The decision to kill Henry Blake was kept secret not just from the cast but from CBS network executives, and the network nearly blocked it. When CBS became aware of what the writers were planning, there was significant internal resistance. Killing a main character in an American network comedy series was without precedent, and the network was genuinely uncertain about the audience response. The argument the producers made, and eventually won, was that MASH had never been simply a comedy, and that the genre framing was a delivery mechanism for something the audience received without always being consciously aware of it. Henry Blake's death was not a dramatic stunt. It was a statement that war does not have a ceiling on what it is willing to take, and that doing everything right does not protect you. CBS agreed to air it. The switchboard received thousands of calls. A significant portion came from veterans who wrote in to say that what they had seen in that scene was the most accurate thing American television had ever produced about what it felt like to be inside a war and receive news about someone who was not going to come home. Some of those letters are still in the CBS archives, which tells you something about how long that 60 seconds has stayed with the people it reached. Number 13. David Ogden Stiers, who played Charles Emerson Winchester III from season 6 onward, was a trained and serious classical musician before he was an actor, and this is more significant to understanding his performance than most accounts acknowledge. The Winchester character's devotion to classical music was not invented by the writers as backstory for Stiers to research and approximate from the outside. It was built around something Stiers already genuinely was. The episode considered Winchester's finest, involving a group of Korean musicians learning to perform under his reluctant and then deeply invested guidance, ends with a loss that Winchester absorbs in complete and permanent silence. He never speaks of it again. The show never returns to it. Stiers plays the moment not as a performance of grief, but as recognition of something already known. He understood what that music meant to someone. He understood what it meant to encounter beauty of that particular kind under those particular circumstances, and then have it taken away without warning or ceremony. What the writing gave him was a frame. What he brought to it was his actual relationship with the thing itself. That distinction is present in every frame of that episode if you watch it knowing what Stiers actually was before he became Winchester. Number 14. The show's depiction of the Korean War was a deliberate creative displacement for Vietnam, which was still ongoing when MASH premiered in 1972. A show set explicitly in Vietnam in 1972 would have been so immediately and intensely polarizing that it might not have survived the network development process. Korea provided enough historical distance for the audience to engage with the anti-war argument without the defensive reflex that direct Vietnam content provoked in the political climate of that moment. The writers were not naive about what they were doing. They were strategic about it. Korea was the frame, Vietnam was the subject. The audience understood, at least partially, and the parts of the audience that preferred not to fully understand still received the argument without knowing they were receiving it. That is a specific kind of effectiveness that direct political content rarely achieves. By 1983, when the show ended and the political temperature around Vietnam had shifted enough to allow more direct engagement, MASH had already spent 11 years saying what it needed to say through the displacement, reaching people who would have closed the door on the direct version and finding a way in anyway. Number 15. The final image of the MASH finale was not in the original script. The aerial shot of Hawkeye in a helicopter looking down at the word goodbye, spelled out in rocks on a California hillside, was added during the production process. The rocks were physically arranged by the crew. The decision about who had arranged them within the world of the story, the strong implication that it was Radar, who had left the show 2 full seasons earlier and was not present for the finale, was never confirmed explicitly in the episode itself. No character says his name in connection with the rocks. No scene establishes it. The audience is left to understand it from the accumulated weight of 11 seasons and what they know about who Radar was to Hawkeye and what Radar was capable of knowing before anyone else knew it. A person who was no longer there had thought ahead and left something in place for the moment when the person he cared about most would need to look down and see that someone had remembered him before the end. Radar was not there for the goodbye. He arranged it anyway, in rocks, on a hillside in California, standing in for Korea, readable only from above. Readable only by the person in the helicopter looking down for the last time. He always knew what was coming. He knew Hawkeye would need that word, and he made sure it was there before he left. The person who had been everyone's early warning system had given Hawkeye one last signal. Not a helicopter incoming, just a word. Just enough to let him know that someone had thought of him at the end, that he had not been forgotten in the leaving. That even from 2 seasons away and a continent apart in the story's geography, someone who loved him had found a way to be present for the moment he needed it most. That is not a television detail. That is MASH doing what it always did when it was at its best. Saying something true in a way you were not quite expecting, leaving it there in the frame without comment and trusting you to find it. If there is a MASH secret you think we missed, or a story you want us to look at next, leave it in the comments. We read every one, and some of the best videos on this channel started as a single comment from someone who thought we might have missed something important.